Imagine producing 50% more value for your boss this year, right? But your paycheck only goes up by like a few pennies.
Yeah, it's a grim thought.
Right. Now imagine that kind of brutal economic stagnation lasting not just for a bad quarter or, a bad decade, but for your entire lifetime.
Which is incredibly hard to wrap your head around.
It really is.
Yeah.
And, well, welcome to Engels Pause. The reason we're starting there today is because the incredibly dense, frankly fascinating stack of notes you handed us for this deep dive is anchored around this terrifying premise.
Yeah, it's a massive convergence you've mapped out here.
Exactly. You've mapped out this collision of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and eponymous machines, and you've tied it all to an economic framework you dubbed the Julio Aranda distribution thesis.
Which, I have to say, is a really vital framing. Because what you've asked us to look at isn't just, a list of cool sci-fi futuristic technologies.
Right. It's not just a tech review.
Exactly. It's an inquiry into the underlying mechanics of distribution. We are essentially looking at a documented economic pattern to understand the physics of, well, who actually captures the wealth when society undergoes an unprecedented technological rupture.
So our mission today is crystal clear. We aren't just geeking out over the tech. We are dissecting your thesis to figure out exactly who benefits from this monumental shift we are living through and when.
Which is the trillion-dollar question.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this, because looking at this massive intersection of quantum compute, generative AI, and robotics, it is very easy to get blinded by the sheer scale of the engineering. But you're arguing that to understand where we are going, we actually have to travel back to the late 1700s.
We do. And to visualize why, we need to abandon the cliche idea that this technology is just some glowing, futuristic data matrix, right?
Yeah, like something out of a movie.
Exactly. We need to look at it mechanically. What you've mapped out in your notes is essentially an engine.
Okay, an engine.
Right. Quantum computing is the high-octane fuel, AI is the combustion chamber, and autonomous robotics is the drivetrain.
I love that analogy.
But to understand who gets run over by that engine and who actually gets to drive it, your research points us straight to the work of Oxford economist Carl Benedict Frey.
Yes, specifically his 2019 book, The Technology Trap. He documented the economic realities of the early Industrial Revolution with, honestly, forensic precision.
It's a fantastic historical anchor.
And the numbers he pulled are just staggering. He notes that between 1780 and 1840, the output per worker, so the actual tangible productivity generated by an individual on a daily basis, grew by a massive 46%.
The output skyrocketed, yeah, mostly because of the new steam-powered machinery.
Oh, yeah.
But the data reveals the trap. During that exact same 60-year period, real weekly wages only rose by 12%.
Wow, just 12% over 60 years.
Exactly. The labor share of national income just plummeted. The middle-income artisanal jobs withered away, and economic inequality widened into an absolute chasm.
So, okay, put yourself in those shoes. You were working in a factory, you were surrounded by these massive new machines, and you were producing almost 50% more goods for your employer, but your standard of living is totally frozen.
Frozen for an entire human lifespan.
Right.
That 60 to 70-year gap, that agonizing delay between when a new technology enriches the capital owners and when those benefits finally, supposedly, trickle down to the working class, that is what economists call Engels Pause.
The owners amass unprecedented wealth immediately, while the workers just suffer decades of stagnation.
Yes, and this isn't just some dusty, abstract theory from the 1800s. The structural mechanism behind this was validated just a couple of years ago by MIT economist Daron Acemoglu.
Right, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics back in 2024.
He did, and he proved this exact failure mode of technology, where institutional drift allows automation to just crush labor without adequately replacing it.
And what's really fascinating here is the specific mechanism Acemoglu identified. He coined the term so-so automation.
Yes, a brilliant concept.
It really is. It describes technologies that are just functional enough for a business to justify adopting them to replace human labor, but not actually revolutionary enough to generate the massive productivity booms that create new industries and new jobs.
Right, they displace, but they don't propel.
Exactly. I want to make sure we are really grasping the mechanics of this so-so automation concept, because I feel like it's the linchpin of your entire thesis here. So imagine you own a busy high-end restaurant.
Okay.
And you decide to fire your highly skilled sous chef to save, say, $100,000 a year on salary. And instead, you buy an outrageously expensive, heavily marketed, automated food processor.
A textbook capital investment designed to replace human labor.
Right. But here's the catch. The machine is incredibly finicky. It requires constant software updates. It jams if the root vegetables are, like, the wrong density.
Oh, yeah.
And it takes your remaining kitchen staff an hour and a half just to take it apart and sanitize it at the end of the night.
Right, so it's a huge hidden time sink.
Exactly. So the kitchen isn't actually getting food out to the dining room any faster than when the human sous chef was just chopping vegetables by hand. You haven't gained any powerful compounding productivity, but the labor, the human being, is still displaced.
The wages are gone.
Yes, the wages are gone, but the miraculous economic boom never arrives.
The displacement is immediate, but the promised systemic wealth generation is a total mirage.
Right.
Which brings us to the core tension in your notes. If history proves that the technology comes first, wealth concentrates at the top, and worker benefits lag by decades, well, are we currently walking blindfolded into a modern Engels pause?
If history proves the Julio Randa distribution thesis, that the tech comes first and the worker benefits arrive decades later, is our current tech wave following this exact same script?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the underlying economic incentives of the capital owners honestly haven't changed since 1780.
Right.
But the variable that is changing right now, the thing that makes our current era terrifyingly unique, is the simultaneity.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting, because your notes argue that we can't just map the 1780s directly onto today.
We can.
Historically, disruption hit one domain at a time, right? The Industrial Revolution localized its damage to physical labor.
Right, muscles and mechanics.
Exactly. And then 150 years later, the Computer Revolution localized its damage to calculation and routine clerical work. Society had generations to absorb the blow, shift the workforce, and adapt.
But this time, we were watching three massive, historically distinct acceleration tracks merge into a single point of impact for the first time ever.
Let's follow your engine metaphor and look at the combustion chamber first. Track 1, AI.
Okay.
And we aren't talking about autocomplete or predictive text. We are talking about the wholesale commoditization of cognitive tasks. Generative AI is already highly operational, stripping out the middle layers of the legal field, medical analysis, financial auditing, administration. It's just eating the cognitive baseline.
So the cognitive safety net, the cushy desk jobs that displaced physical laborers used to transition into that net, is already fraying.
Right.
Then we look at the fuel, track 2, quantum computing. This is the removal of our physical computation limits.
Which is mind-bending.
It is. Classical computers process information sequentially, but quantum systems process multidimensional variables simultaneously. You noted in the research that design cycles for complex materials are collapsing from years down to months. Molecular simulation, which used to be physically impossible, is now fully unlocked.
And finally, track 3, the drivetrain. Autonomous machines and robotics, the literal replacement of physical labor. As of 2023, there were already 3.5 million industrial robots globally.
And that number is climbing fast.
Right. And now, general-purpose humanoid robots machines from Figure, Tesla's Optimus, Boston Dynamics, Atlas, they are literally walking into warehouses. But wait, I'm struggling to connect the dots here. I have to push back on this idea of a perfectly synchronized convergence. A quantum physicist making a breakthrough in a sterile sub-zero lab feels completely disconnected from a 300-pound metal robot packing boxes in an Amazon warehouse. Aren't researchers building these things in entirely separate silos? How does a breakthrough in a quantum lab actually accelerate the physical robot walking around a warehouse?
That is the exact blind spot that most current macroeconomic analysis suffers from.
Yeah.
And it's why your thesis is so vital. We treat these as parallel tracks because, well, human academia is siloed.
Right. The physics department doesn't talk to the AI department.
Exactly.
Right.
But the technology itself is a compounding feedback loop. Here is the mechanism. The quantum computer doesn't just sit in a vacuum. Its massive simultaneous computational power is directed at training artificial intelligence models.
Oh, I see. So the quantum fuel goes directly into the AI combustion chamber.
Yes, exponentially accelerating its capabilities. Then, that profoundly advanced AI is turned toward physical engineering. It radically speeds up the design iteration of the autonomous robots.
Right.
The AI uses quantum-backed physics simulations to figure out how a bipedal robot should balance, how much torque it needs in a robotic knuckle to grasp an egg without breaking it, or how to navigate a chaotic warehouse environment.
And it does all of that virtually, right?
Exactly. It does all of this in a high-fidelity simulation millions of times over before a single piece of aluminum is ever cast in the real world.
Wait, really? So the breakthroughs aren't parallel at all. The quantum breakthrough instantly upgrades the AI, which instantly upgrades the physical robot.
Precisely. The physical labor market is flooded at the exact same microsecond the cognitive labor market is collapsing.
Yeah.
And the deeply concerning part that you highlighted is the massive gap in current research. Practically no one is formally modeling the convergence point where these three hit simultaneously.
And because nobody is modeling this three-way collision, we are currently drifting towards a highly precarious 5 to 15-year window.
Very precarious.
Let's look at the realistic worst-case scenario that your data outlines, which, frankly, looks like the default path we are walking down right now. Let's start with the sheer vulnerability of our global infrastructure, specifically the encryption collapse.
The mechanics of this threat are absolute. Most of our secure digital infrastructure, global banking, secure military communications, government databases, runs on RSA encryption.
Right. Standard stuff.
But RSA works by taking two massive prime numbers and multiplying them together. A classical computer would take thousands of years to reverse engineer that math and guess the original primes.
Because it has to guess them one by one.
Exactly, sequentially. But a quantum computer, using Shor's algorithm, doesn't guess sequentially. It solves the prime factorization exponentially faster, effectively shattering the lock in seconds.
And the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, formally acknowledged this. They began standardizing post-quantum cryptography back in 2024.
They did, but there was a massive migration gap. The window between when quantum computers become capable of breaking RSA and when every single regional bank, rural hospital, and military base on Earth actually upgrades to the new post-quantum standard, that gap leaves the global economy exposed to catastrophic systemic hacking.
It is a period of maximum fragility. And then you layer structural mass unemployment on top of that digital fragility. The International Monetary Fund estimates that roughly 40% of global employment is exposed to AI.
And we are already seeing the de-skilling take hold.
Oh, yeah. Data from Harvard Business School showed a 24% decrease in generative AI-exposed skills per firm in top quartile automated jobs.
It's happening fast.
Let's break down what a 24% decrease in skills actually means for you, the listener. It means the premium you get paid for your specialized knowledge, whether you are a coder, a paralegal, or a financial analyst, vanishes.
The knowledge is commoditized.
Exactly. So your leverage to demand a higher wage just disappears.
This raises an important question. How does a modern society function or maintain civic stability when both the cognitive and physical wage premiums vanish simultaneously with zero international framework to manage the fallout?
It's terrifying.
And the stakes become incredibly stark when you look at the military implications you flagged. The UN has been debating lethal autonomous weapons systems, or LAWS, since 2014.
With absolutely no binding international treaty to show for it.
Nothing. When you combine quantum targeting, AI strategy, and autonomous robotics, you entirely remove the human from the lethal decision loop. Machines deciding who lives and dies at machine speed.
It's an incredibly heavy reality to process. But looking at your notes, the most insidious part of this default path might be the sheer consolidation of ownership.
The infrastructure consolidation.
Yeah. If we look at who actually owns the engine we've been talking about, it's a tiny fraction of companies. 5 major players in AI: Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, Meta, Amazon. 4 dominant players in quantum, 3 in robotics.
It's a massive bottleneck.
Hold on, if the infrastructure of the entire next economy is already consolidated into about a dozen companies before the economy even arrives, isn't the game rigged before you and I even start playing?
Looking strictly at the economic data, that is the exact repetition of Engels' Pause.
Yeah.
Just mathematically amplified to an absurd degree.
Right.
In the 1840s, the ratio of factory owners to displaced artisans might have been, say, 1 to 100. In this modern convergence with the infrastructure pre-consolidated across compute, cognition, and physical chassis, the ratio of owners to displaced citizens could realistically be 1 to 100,000.
1 to 100,000. Wow.
It is the same historical mechanism of wealth concentration, but compressed into a much faster timeline with significantly less social resilience to absorb the shock.
It paints a very grim picture, but, and this is a crucial pivot in your thesis, it's not a guaranteed dystopia.
No, it's not.
Your sources heavily outline a realistic best-case scenario, a utopian path that could materialize over a 10 to 20-year time frame if society makes very deliberate choices.
The technological upside is profound. If we manage the distribution, the benefits are staggering. Take quantum-accelerated drug discovery.
Okay.
Right now, developing a new pharmaceutical takes 10 to 15 years and billions of dollars because it relies on physical trial and error in wet labs.
It's incredibly slow.
But quantum simulation allows us to perfectly model how a protein folds and interacts with a molecule virtually. That compresses the timeline down to just 2 to 4 years. Diseases that are currently considered unsolvable at a molecular level become entirely solvable engineering problems.
And think about the sheer reach of that medicine. AI diagnostics bring top-tier, specialized medical care to populations that currently have zero physical infrastructure.
It democratizes health.
We're talking about rural Asia, sub-Saharan Africa. Suddenly, a local health worker with a smartphone can diagnose a rare condition with the exact same accuracy as a top specialist at the Mayo Clinic.
Furthermore, quantum simulation of materials leads to immediate breakthroughs in battery density and solar panel efficiency, which is the exact technological leap required to finalize the global transition to clean energy.
So imagine this incredible upside actually working for the working class. If the massive productivity gains generated by this engine are aggressively redistributed, maybe through updated labor laws, universal basic income pilots, or massive corporate profit-sharing structures, human work isn't eliminated.
It's redefined.
Yes, redefined. We step away from routine, soul-crushing labor and transition into roles focused entirely on human judgment, care, empathy, and creativity. You cited Germany's public-private apprenticeship system in your notes as a really strong precedent for this.
The German dual vocational education and training system is a brilliant mechanism for surviving technological shifts.
How does it work?
In that model, the government and the private sector co-fund training, and the curriculum is updated in real time with the cutting edge of industry.
Oh, that's smart.
Unlike a traditional 4-year university degree that might be teaching, outdated software by the time you actually graduate, the German model allows for rapid, continuous retraining of the workforce as the technology evolves.
It proves that structural solutions do exist. We aren't helpless here.
We aren't helpless, but we must ground this conversation in the reality of the geopolitical data you provided. The text assigns this utopian scenario an honest probability low.
Wait, low, because the tech won't pan out.
No, the technology will likely exceed our expectations. The probability is low because this utopian scenario requires a level of coordinated, selfless, global political will that has just never materialized at the speed in human history.
Ah, right, the politic.
The productivity benefits of AI and robotics simply will not naturally, organically compensate for the job losses, particularly for low-skilled workers.
It won't trickle down fast enough.
Without massive, immediate, and aggressive policy interventions, retraining frameworks like the German model deployed globally, and wealth redistribution at a scale we've never attempted, the free market will just default to the worst-case scenario. The technological buffer doesn't exist anymore, and our institutional buffer is moving far too slowly.
So what does this all mean? If we pull all the threads of your research together, the historical pattern is glaringly obvious. The machinery arrives, it enriches a tiny sliver of society, and the vast majority of the working class suffers through a multi-decade pause before they see any tangible benefit to their daily lives.
Exactly.
The comfort might distribute widely. We might all get incredibly smart AI assistants on our phones, but the actual wealth and leverage concentrates narrowly.
That is the Julio Aranda distribution thesis in its purest form. And what you so astutely recognize by studying these sources is that the danger this time isn't the economic pattern itself. The danger is the unprecedented speed and simultaneity.
The three tracks hitting at once.
Right. We have cognitive displacement, physical displacement, and a computational unlock hitting our civilization at the exact same moment. By mapping this out, you've identified the gap, the exact territory of second-order economic effects that most researchers, trapped in their academic silos, are actively ignoring.
Which brings us to a final, entirely new thought to mull over as we watch this incredible, terrifying convergence unfold.
I'm curious where you're going with this.
Well, if we assume this trajectory holds, if cognitive intelligence, complex problem solving, and precise physical labor are all fully commoditized and performed perfectly by machines in the near future, what if the most valuable, the most highly compensated human skill of the 2030s isn't a technical skill at all.
That is a fascinating premise.
When the engine of our economy is entirely automated and machines can outthink and outbuild us, what if the only premium left in the market is simply the ability to build genuine human-to-human trust and community?
Because machines can't replicate genuine trust.
Right. Maybe the murky, beautiful, strictly human connections are all we will have left to trade.
It's a profound thought to leave on.
Thank you so much for sharing these incredible notes with us and for bringing us along in this deep dive. We wish you the absolute best as you, and honestly all of us, navigate this convergence. Take care.